Hey there, YouTube, P2 Finger. Too long, don't read. When building a guitar amp, I would recommend you go with a chime amp or a punch amp. That's a TDA 7052 chip. That's what I used to recommend. If you're going to build a guitar amp, I really like the TDA 2822 board, which it's like a postage stamp size board for 75 cents. It's got a built-in like volume control. There's 6 connections: the battery connection, the speaker connection, and the input. Now, you really should have a buffer. And we'll talk about different ways of doing that. If you're going to run a pedal in front of it or a multi-effector or anything in front, well, there's your buffer. So you don't necessarily need it. But if you're going to plug your guitar directly into the power amp, that's not recommended. It's just, they don't mate very well. If you have that extra gain stage there, ooh, it sounds good. It sounds real good. And we don't have to build our buffer from scratch. We can, any buffered pedal, Boss pedal, even if you bypass the pedal, it's still doing its job. So if I was going to build a mini amp, battery amp project, and I was going to have a booster in it, I would still do the buffer, and I would still put the buffer connected physically to the input of the power amp. So the flow chart would be input, booster, buffer, power amp, speaker. And that's how I would do that. Again, I would avoid LM386, the TDA 7052, that's the punch amp. That's a 1 watt project. And those are really good. They sound really good. I got one here I'm going to demo for you guys, but I really don't recommend them. They're not readily available. They use, you have to have the buffer, which is kind of a fact of life, which is usually a through-hole JFET, or, there's ways around that. We're going to talk about that. And you can build the Clon buffer. The Clon buffer uses a TL072 op amp. So it's just that's the fact of life. Like, if you're going to build yourself an amp, you can get it all in one on a postage stamp size little chip. It's going to blow your mind. It's rated at 2 watts, which the original amp designs were a half a watt. So this is 4 times more powerful than your uncle's mini amp, And as far as a bench amp, a test amp, a belt clip amp, or something you're going to take to the woods, this is more than enough. And if you're using a multi-effector or a pedal board, you don't have to worry about that buffer deal. That's built into your pedal board or your multi-effector. So, like me, I have a buffer, and this lets me determine if I need one. I can bring this in instead of bringing in a Boss pedal, or I can just use this if I want. So more recently, I had seen people buying little LM386 and doing stuff with it. I'm like, I'm going to make my video. What you guys want to get is the 2822. So let me take you over. I guess first I'll show you this. So here is my punch amp. This has a battery pack, and you can recharge that through this plug here. It sounds really good. It's got the speaker. I guess it's a 4-inch and a single, like a gain knob. It's a clean amp. I don't build distortion amps. This is a 18 volt. There's 2 9-volt batteries in here. This is just a little circuit board here that's on the potentiometer. That's how you mount that, and then the jacks are here. And this is a booster. This is a op amp booster, and this was built with a little board that you buy. I was saying, people buy these little boards and build stuff. Well, you can use this booster as your gain stage for your amp. It doesn't replace. I mean, you can. I've got one here where there's no buffer on it. It's just got the booster, and it's not bad. It's just better. It sounds better, I think, if you have that. Now, to take you over that's the amp that I built this weekend out of the 75-cent chip amp. And there's a multi-effector in front of that. That's why it sounds, why I didn't need to build a buffer into it. And that amp, it does run off of a 12-volt battery pack, which is 18650. So again, the buffer is really important, and you can get the power amp as an all-in-one for 75 cents. And that is the TDA 2822. So I'm going to show you some pictures now. We're going to hop over to my desktop. So here is the, I'm working on the booster. Here's the circuit board for the booster. And put an output jack, and then there's a couple of batteries. Here's a bypass switch. This is the guts of the booster. My clean boost pedal that I built, this guy here that I just showed you, and you can also build this into the amp as an input stage. So how I did this today, I unsoldered the jack. There was a jack solder to this board, and so I removed that and just cut a wire in where the input is and ran that wire up to this input jack here. That's how I did that. Now, this booster, these are excellent, and they sell them on Amazon for $7, but you can get them for less than $3 on AliExpress or eBay. So this is what I would recommend if you're going to build a guitar amp, 2822. So here is our power input, here is our speaker output, and here is our, like your input jack would be here. Well, you'd want to have a buffer, and then the buffer going to the input, or the booster. You don't really want to go straight in, but you can, especially if you're going to be running pedals, pedal board. But if you're going to have your guitar going straight into the amp, you want to put an additional stage here. It really is going to make all the difference in the world. So we see when guys build these things, they will have that stage here, a 2N5457, which is hard to get now. It works great with a J201 and an MPF 102. There's a forum post on this guy where somebody directly contradicts me and says you can't use it with a J201. Well, I hate to tell you, bud, but you can, and I'm not the only one who knows that. I ran J113, I ran 2N5458, I ran 2N5457, I ran MPF 102, and J201. And in the order of J113 was quiet, 2N5458 were quiet, MPF 102 was the best, followed by 5457, and then J201 was a little bit less. And you need to pay attention if you're going to build one of these. Does your circuit diagram call for a 52A or just a 52? Because if it doesn't have the A, it's different. And like these chime amp, or here it's called a punch amp, these do sound really good. And if you want to build it from scratch and go through the process and the hassle of, yeah, this is the one that I recommend. But to be honest with you, after experiencing how good the TDA 2822 boards at just 75 or 92 cents, you have it include the potentiometer. It's pretty basic. it's running from 1.8 to 12 volts, so it's like the same voltage, but it's putting out twice the power. It's 2 watts. This is the one that just really sounds good. Like, I can't really turn this up now because it's late, but man, does this sound good, especially if you put a buffer with it. So, and you have to do that. If you're going to run a pedal that's buffered, then you don't. If you're going to run a multi-effector, that's got the buffer built in. Like I said, but if you're just going to be plugging your guitar amp into this thing, you will need to build yourself a buffer. Now, what I did, I had this microcube that was gutted. I had an oval speaker that was rated at 6 watts, and I screwed that in there. And then I had a black plastic, what do you call it, clipboard. I cut that piece of plastic, and then I mounted the board here with a input jack. There's an LED for the power, and then a power switch. So this was never a Roland microcube. It was just a gutted chassis that I had, and it has the 2822 in it, and man, does it sound good. Now, you have to, no excuses, have a Tillman, a buffer. You don't have to have a Tillman. This is the Tillman. It uses a J201, which is a JFET, and those are kind of hard to get now. These little transistors, these JFETs, whatever buffer you choose to build, they're all about the same. It just boosts it a little bit. It's just the initial stage to kind of uncouple the power amp from the load of your pickup, because there's an impedance mismatch, and that's not good. So the buffer is what we put in between. And like, I go to pedalpcb.com. I bought myself a 50 pack of these. So, and then I bought all the parts to go with it. So you can put your through hole in here, and then it's like in and out, and then this is like ground, and this is plus 9 volts. And this would be your buffer then. So whenever I need a buffer, I can just grab one of these, and then in this hole, these 3 holes, I use one of these things. And I get a SMT, which is a tiny little part. It's this big as I'm drawing on here. You solder that on there, you get a strip of these JFETs for cheap. And they're legit. Because see, if you buy the through-hole ones, you'll get ripped off. You'll get fakes. So what I do, I go to this place called Delyk PCB, D-E-L-Y-K, Delyk PCB. And I buy their 4-pack. I mean, if you're just going to get one of these, you could probably order your JFET to SMD SOT 203, your daughter board, it's called. You can get that from the same place. They sell them here, but they're 50 cents a piece. The thing about Delyk is you get 4 of them for 65 cents. So I bought bulk. I got like 50 of these, and then I got 50 of these. So whenever I need a buffer, I can just slap one together, and it's not a big deal. I can cram it in any pedal that calls for it. So that's how I handle my thing with, here was me working today. There's the booster pedal. This was the layout I did. It doesn't ground and bypass, and it was noisy, and I found that it was only noisy when I was bypassing it, and if I ran the buffer in front of it, it was quiet. So it's like, well, there you go. Why wouldn't you ever always have a buffer? So the long story short of it is, for this device, I probably will put a buffer in here unless it's going to be on a pedal board with a buffer, or have a buffer somewhere near it, because it doesn't matter if it's before it or after it. The buffer will go through and buffer out quite a few connections. But for each time you have one of these jacks and a connector, that all adds up to resistance that kills your signal, and that's what the buffer fixes. So for every 10 or so of these connections, you really should have another buffer. That's just how that works. It's impedance. It's killing your signal. So yeah, to review, I really don't like the Noisy Cricket, the Little Gem, and the Ruby. Any LM386 amp I don't like. I do like the chime and the punch amp, although these are kind of a hassle. I mean, if you've got to build another board, you might as well just build this, I guess, if you can find these chips. But to be honest, if I'm going to be doing little amps, I'd rather have an all-in-one board that has the pod, and you just, here's your input, here's your speaker output, here's your power, and you're good to go. And it's twice the power. So that's why, if we're talking about mini amps, I recommend the 2822. That's what I recommend, but buffering is important. Just like we see on these layouts, they've got the buffer stage, So that's up to you, finding if you want to use a traditional Tillman FET preamp, get a layout, something like that, or you're going to be doing a lot of this, buy a pack of a bunch of these and get through-hole JFETs, or you can use these little adapters and get the tiny ones and solder those, make a day of it. So I thought I know it's super late, but I've got this. Here is this is a punch amp. And what I'm going to do, this has the buffer built in on it. And it is it is really, it's a good sounding. Now that's a punch amp through this smaller speaker, and if I were to run my multi-effector, it would sound a whole lot better. Now what we're going to do, we're going to connect this buffer. This is that JFET buffer. I was saying how, they're buying little circuits and making little things. Well, this is one I haven't seen yet, and it's not an LM386. This is the TL072. It's called a guitar preamp, is what they call it. And if I can find my pictures here, I can show you guys. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, they sell them on Amazon for $6.99. And this cable plugs into this jack slot here, so it'll be like your 9 volts in, or it'll take 12 or 24. Your ground, and then there's the sound coming out. The input is here. So this is a good sounding little unit. It's $7 on Amazon, but I found it on AliExpress for less than $3. So I bought myself 3 of these, and I really like them. Now, I was able to unsolder this jack. You see it has the input jack right on there. I unsoldered and I removed that jack. And at that point, I ran a wire from where the jack was up to this jack here. So if we look, going back to the images that I took today, you can see how the PCB is mounted to the front panel through this nut and washer. It's fastened, and I have removed the input jack, and there is a cable coming here. Here's the cable going down to the foot switch, and then the foot switch comes up to the input. So you very well can make this into a booster pedal. It makes a great clean boost pedal out of here. Or you could build this as a stage in your amp. You could try. I have one amp that I built here it's a chip amp, and instead of a buffer, I just put one of these boosters and see how that does. Now, we've got the two 9-volt batteries in here, so it is running off of 18 volts, and it's late, so I can't crank this, but what we're going to do is so yeah, this is set on this is set on half. Shit. I didn't want to bother the neighbors. With that amount of boost, that's half. So yeah, it boosts a lot. Anyway, could try my buffer since we're trying stuff. This before, this was the bypass signal was kind of gnarly, and I put a buffer on there and that fixed it. But that'll you'll find that to be a common occurrence with so this is buffered, and then we click the boost. Oh yeah. Now I'm going to eliminate the buffer. Yeah, I can't really tell anything. Ultimately, you will know when you need a buffer. If it sounds lifeless or flat. The other thing one can do is either build yourself one, a bypassable buffer, or take any non-true bypass pedal. How to test if your pedal has a buffer? Well, plug it in, bypass it, and then unplug the battery or power supply. If your signal goes away when there's no power applied, it's got a buffer. If you unplug power and you still got signal, that means it's true bypass somehow. But the like I tried, you very well can just put the power amp chip in with the battery, and that's your amp. But if you're a tone snob, if you put that buffer in there or a booster, I mean, ideally, I really don't like doing this without a buffer. Even if I'm going to have a booster, I'll have the buffer in there as well. That's really the best way to go. So if you guys have any questions about this type of thing, I can try to give you a hand. Whenever you're dealing with anything over 12 volts, you should use a fuse. So for this stuff, you kind of really don't need to. But one of the rules that I live by my life is I never plug anything in or put batteries in anything or turn anything on until I've tested it. So I will ensure that before I turn anything on, I will disconnect one of the wires and hook my meter up. And when I turn the power on, there's one step left to do, which is solder that wire to where it goes. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to test it unless I've checked the polarity to make sure I don't have something flip-flopped, because it always is. It's always wrong. And you don't want to blow something up. So always test before testing. Always check. And when you're doing this type of work, when you watch any, like a luthier or craftsman or anybody who's doing this type of work, I mean, it's not ditch digging, but typically, how do I work best, Donna?
Give me a multiple choice. What do you mean, how do you work best?
If I am hurry that mother effer up, grinding my teeth and cursing and swearing, or if I'm like, let's make a joke and sing a song, whistle while you, like, I do this work best when I'm relaxed and when I'm cheerful. If I'm in a hurry, there's gonna be
a mistake or a quick.
I'm gonna blow something up. Yeah. I'm gonna end up having to redo something. So it's people say like, "Oh, that's so cool that you understand electronics." I don't understand electronics. I can look and I can see red and black and I can tell the difference between those two things. So I at that point then I will test, and I will test again. You know, I test beforehand and then I hook the thing up and then I'm ready to go do the test, and it's like, no, you're not. Don't even think about it. Unconnect that wire, put your test leads on there, do whatever you got to do to test it, and then hook it back up. And once you know that plus is really where it says plus and that's not minus, you don't have them flip-flopped. So that's my advice to you. The LM386 is a joke. The TLO72s are good. They really are, but I like the one that I did today, the 2822, the 2-watt. That thing, man, I'm telling you, and it's way louder than you need to. I've heard people say, "Oh, my chip amp rattles the windows when I put it on a 2x12. Yeah, well, you also told me that I couldn't run a J201 in it, and you fucking can. You're wrong about that, dude. You're wrong about that. Unbelievable. Anyway, you guys, I dig this. This may end up being part of my thing. I don't know. This little JFET boost or TLO72 boost, I gotta see. Probably not. I mean, this is like a backup boost. I've got a couple of EP boosts here. I've got a full tone boost. So this is like, let me see how this $3 boost works in this recycled. Like, it really looks cool. It's got 18 volts, but more than likely I'm not going to be running this. I'm going to run something that has potentiometers or at least throw switches to cut some highs and lows. You know, let's be realistic about it. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. If you have any questions or comments or can steer me towards anybody who's making interesting content about this. I tend to see these guys who are like my amp and my 386 and like I watch them and I'm just like, it just kind of makes me sick. Because they have like an air of superiority about it. Certain guys, they're like acting like it's making a bigger deal out of it than it is. They're not really humble, and I try not to come off like that because I know how little I really do know, and I know how lucky I am. So I try to be down to earth, not make a big deal out of it. That being said, I really do enjoy the work. So take care of yourselves, hug your pets, and peace.